The battlefield was silent now, but the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, full of smoke, broken ships, and the smell of burned metal. Once, hours ago, this place had been alive with laser fire and screaming engines. Now, it was a graveyard. Luke. Carter moved carefully between the wrecks, scanning the area with his handheld scanner. He was a human field medic, trained to find survivors even in hopeless places. His armor was scratched, his helmet visor cracked, but he kept going. He didn't care about the danger. Somewhere among the ruins, someone could still be alive. He stepped over a fallen drone and heard a faint sound, almost like a weak breath. He froze and looked around. The sound came again, from behind a half-buried alien escape pod. Luke hurried over, pushed the metal aside, and his heart stopped for a moment. Inside lay an alien woman. Her skin was pale silver, her hair a dark blue, tangled mess. Her chest rose and fell, but barely. Her uniform was torn and soaked with dark purple blood. Luke instantly recognized her species, the Yelvari, one of humanity's oldest rivals. And this woman was no ordinary soldier. Even in her broken state, she had a presence, a certain grace. Luke knelt beside her and quickly checked her vitals. They were dropping fast. His medkit's auto-injector scanned her biology and beeped a red warning. Treatment incompatible. Human medicine couldn't help her. Luke cursed under his breath. He could leave her. The war between humans and Yelvari had taken millions of lives. If she died, no one from his side would care. But Luke wasn't built like that. A patient was a patient. Friend or enemy didn't matter. He tried stabilizing her with oxygen and fluid patches, but her pulse kept fading. Her eyelids fluttered and she whispered something in her own language. Words Luke couldn't understand, but the fear in her voice was clear. Desperation hit him. He remembered a theory from medical training. In some cases, alien and human. Blood types could be forced to match in emergencies using a rapid nanofilter inside a transfusion unit. It was risky. It could kill both the donor and the patient. But it was the only option. Luke slid his own arm into the transfusion cuff, setting the nanofilter to maximum. "All right. This is going to hurt," he muttered to himself, then connected the line to her. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then her chest jerked, her skin color darkened slightly, and her breathing deepened. The scanner blinked yellow, still critical but improving. Luke felt his own strength draining. The machine was pushing filtered human blood into her system while carefully removing toxins from hers. His vision blurred, but he kept the connection steady. Minutes later, her eyes opened. They were a striking violet, sharp even in her weak state. She looked at him in confusion, then in something close to disbelief. "Why?" she whispered, her voice rough and accented. "You're alive," Luke replied simply. "That's all that matters right now." Before either could speak again, movement flickered in the smoke. Luke's head snapped up. Figures were approaching. Tall, armored Yelvari soldiers, their rifles glowing. They spread out, surrounding him. One of them shouted something in their language, and Luke slowly raised his hands, keeping himself between them and the woman. The lead soldier stepped forward, scanning the woman. His eyes widened. Then he barked a single word. "Kaylee." Luke glanced at her. "That's your name?" She gave the smallest nod. The soldiers began speaking rapidly, their voices sharp. Luke caught only bits from his translator. "Princess, alive, human." A higher-ranking Yelvari officer stepped in. His armor was decorated with silver crests, and his voice was calm but commanding. "Human," he said in accented standard. "Step away from her." Luke's instinct was to obey, but Kaylee's hand weakly gripped his arm. It was a soft, trembling hold, but there was strength in her eyes. "He saved me," she said to the officer in her own language. "He gave me his blood." The officer's expression changed from suspicion to something more complicated, maybe respect, maybe shock. Impossible, he muttered. Human blood. Should not. He didn't finish. Two soldiers moved in, gently lifting Kaylee onto a stretcher. She never let go of Luke's arm until she was fully secured. You come, the officer told Luke. By her order. Luke was too tired to argue. His body felt heavy from the blood loss, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just any rescue. This woman was clearly important. And now, because of what he'd done, he was in the middle of something much bigger than he understood. They brought him aboard a sleek Yelvari medical ship. Inside, everything was quiet, efficient, and strangely beautiful. Glowing panels, flowing shapes, no sharp edges. Luke sat in a corner while doctors worked on Kaylee, using advanced tools that seemed almost like magic. He watched as her breathing grew steady, her skin regained color, and her eyes opened wider. She looked different now, stronger, though still weak. Every so often she would glance at him, as if making sure he was still there. Hours passed. Eventually, a doctor approached Luke. Human, he said softly. Your blood. It changed her. We do not know how. Her cells are adapting. Faster than we have ever seen. Luke frowned. Adapting? To what? The doctor hesitated, his eyes flicking toward Kaylee before answering. To you. Luke didn't know what that meant, but before he could ask more, the officer returned. The princess wishes to speak to you. Luke stepped closer to her bed. She was sitting up now, looking at him with those violet eyes. You risked your life, she said quietly, even though we are enemies. I'm a medic, Luke replied. Saving lives is my job. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. And now, my life is tied to yours. I can feel it, as if something in me is not entirely my own anymore. Luke didn't know how to respond, but he could see she was telling the truth. There was a strange connection in her gaze, something unspoken that made him uneasy, yet curious. Before their conversation could go further, the officer entered again. We are taking you both to a neutral station. The council will decide what happens next. Luke nodded, but deep inside, he knew the council's decision was only part of the story. Something had happened during that blood transfusion, something that went beyond medicine. And whatever it was, it had just changed both their lives forever. As the ship left the ruined battlefield behind, Luke leaned back in his seat, feeling the weight of exhaustion. Across from him, Kaylee sat quietly, her eyes closed, but her lips, moving in silent words he couldn't hear. Somewhere in his gut, Luke felt it. This was only the beginning. The neutral station hung in space like a floating city lit by thousands of small lights. It was a place where humans and aliens could meet without war, a rare thing in the galaxy. Luke sat quietly in the small medroom assigned to him. His body still felt weak from the transfusion, but it was nothing compared to the weight in his mind. He had saved an alien princess, given her his blood, and now he was surrounded by her people. He had no idea if they saw him as a hero or a danger. The door opened, and Kaylee entered slowly. She was walking on her own now, though her movements were still careful. Her silver skin glowed softly under the lights, and her violet eyes fixed on him immediately. You're awake, Luke said, standing up out of habit. I am, she replied. Her voice was calm, but carried a strange warmth. The doctors say my recovery is unnatural. They believe your blood is the reason. Luke nodded. They told me the same. She studied him for a long moment. Do you feel it too? Feel. What? He asked. The connection, she said. It's as if I can sense your presence, even when you are not near, and when you are close, my strength grows. Luke hesitated. I've felt something, yes, but I thought it was just because of what happened. Kaylee stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. It's not just that. My body has changed. My senses are sharper. My heartbeat matches yours at times. It is impossible. Yet it is real. Before Luke could reply, the door slid open again, and two Yelvari scientists entered. They looked uneasy but determined. Princess, one said, bowing slightly. We must speak to you privately. There have been new developments. Kaylee looked at Luke, then back at them. You may speak here. He stays. The scientists exchanged a glance but obeyed. During our last medical scan, we detected an anomaly. It is not an illness, it is growth. Inside you. Luke frowned, not understanding. Growth? You mean like tissue repair? The scientist's expression was unreadable. No, like a life form. You are pregnant. The words hung in the air. Luke felt his breath catch. Kaylee's eyes widened, but she didn't speak at first. That is impossible, she said finally. Our species cannot... Not with humans, the scientist shook his head. And yet, the genetic readings are clear. The developing life form carries traits from both you and the human. Luke's mind raced. Wait, you're saying... Yes, the scientist interrupted. This is the first recorded case. The blood transfusion did more than save her life. It merged your genetic codes. Silence followed. Luke didn't know what to feel. Shock, fear, guilt. None of it made sense. Kaylee turned to him, her voice low but steady. You have changed my fate, Luke Carter, and now you may have changed the fate of the galaxy. One of the scientists spoke again, voice urgent. This information must be handled carefully. If certain factions in either of our governments learn of it, they will see the child as a threat. Luke already knew what that meant. Assassination attempts, political chaos, maybe even another war. So what's your plan? He asked. We'll keep her under protection here, the scientist said. But there are already whispers. Someone has leaked the news. Kaylee's expression hardened. Then they will come for me. She looked at Luke again. And they will come for you. Later that day, Luke sat with Kaylee in a quiet observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly outside the window. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Kaylee broke the silence. When I was a child, I was told humans were reckless, dangerous, and selfish. But you risked your life for me without asking for anything. And now, my people would see you as the father of something they cannot understand. Luke gave a small, tired laugh. I didn't think about any of that when I helped you. I just didn't want you to die. She tilted her head, studying him. That is why I trust you, and why I will not let them take you away. Before Luke could answer, the station's alarm blared. A voice over the comm system announced, Security breach in docking Sector 3. All civilians remain in secure areas. Kaylee stood quickly, her eyes narrowing. They're here. Luke felt his pulse quicken. Who's here? Those who don't want this child to exist, she said grimly. The station's guards rushed to block the entrances, but Kaylee grabbed Luke's hand and pulled him toward a service corridor. We can't stay. They will search every room as... They moved quickly through dim, narrow halls. Luke could feel the strange bond between them even more. It was like an invisible thread pulling them together, guiding their steps. They reached a small hangar where a sleek shuttle was docked. Kaylee's personal guard, a tall Yelvari named Thalen, was waiting. Princess, we must leave now. They've already breached the outer gates. Kaylee didn't hesitate. Set a course for the edge of neutral space, somewhere they can't follow easily. Luke climbed aboard with them, still processing everything. Pregnant, hybrid child, political enemies. None of this was part of his life yesterday. The shuttle lifted off. slipping out of the station under cover of false transponder codes. Luke sat across from Kaylee, watching her as she stared out at the stars. "You're not scared?" he asked quietly. "I am," she admitted, "but not for me, for the child, for what it means. If it survives, it will be proof that our species are not so different." Luke nodded slowly. "And if it doesn't?" Kaylee's eyes met his, fierce and unyielding. "Then everything we have risked will be for nothing, and I will not allow that." As the shuttle entered hyperspace, Luke leaned back, exhaustion washing over him again. This was no longer just about saving one life. It was about protecting something that could change the entire galaxy. And he had a feeling the real danger was only just beginning. The Orbital Academy was unusually quiet the next morning. The usual chatter in the halls was replaced with whispers and glances toward the main docking bay. Something was happening, and everyone could feel it. Ethan walked into class, as he always did, keeping his head low, avoiding eye contact. But this time, he noticed that even his bullies weren't laughing. They sat by the window, their eyes fixed on the sky outside. A strange vibration ran through the walls, deep, heavy, and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something enormous. Students turned toward the large observation panels. Outside, the void of space shimmered as a massive shadow emerged from the darkness. It wasn't like the trade ships or patrol cruisers they were used to seeing. This ship was colossal, its black and gold hull stretching so far that it seemed to block the stars. Behind it, glowing lines of blue energy traced along its surface, and enormous spires rose like the crowns of some ancient temple. The teacher froze mid-sentence, her voice caught in her throat. That's a Valori Imperial flagship," students gasped. The Valori Empire was one of the most feared powers in the galaxy, a civilization known for its strict laws, unmatched fleets, and rulers who were spoken of with both respect and fear. "What's it doing here?" one alien boy whispered. "Maybe they're here for the trade summit," another guessed, though his voice trembled. The ship continued to approach, each pulse of its engines sending faint tremors through the station. Docking clamps extended like the arms of some mechanical beast, locking onto the flagship's side. Then came the hiss of the airlocks connecting. In the Academy's main hall, every student and teacher had gathered. Guards from the stations. Security stood at the edges, their hands near their weapons. The airlock doors opened with a deep metallic groan. A line of armored soldiers stepped out first, tall, elegant, and dangerous-looking, their armor engraved with gold patterns that seemed to shimmer with energy. Their weapons, though holstered, were unlike anything most of the students had ever seen. The soldiers moved aside, and then she appeared. She was tall, her posture straight as a blade. Her silver hair flowed down her back, catching the light in, a way that made it look almost like strands of molten metal. Her deep violet eyes scanned the room with the calm of someone who was used to commanding entire armies. She wore a long, flowing robe over her armor, and on her chest was the crest of the Valori royal family, a symbol recognized across the galaxy. The whispers started immediately. "Is that? No, it can't be. That's the Empress." Ethan's heart stopped. The woman walked forward, her steps slow but purposeful. The crowd seemed to part naturally around her, no one daring to block her path. She passed the teachers, the headmaster, and the students, moving straight, toward the back of the hall. Toward him. His bullies, standing nearby, glanced between him and the Empress, confusion growing on their faces. When she reached Ethan, she stopped. For a moment, the entire room was silent. Then, she knelt down so her eyes were level with his. "My son," she said softly, her voice warm and steady. "I came as soon as I heard." Gasps rippled through the room. The headmaster went pale. Ethan's bullies froze, their expressions a mix of disbelief and sudden fear. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. He hadn't seen her in years, hadn't even been sure she was still alive. Now she was here, in front of everyone, calling him her son. She reached out and touched his cheek gently, then straightened and turned to face the headmaster. "I will speak to the one in charge." The headmaster swallowed hard. "Oh, of course, Your Majesty." But the Empress didn't wait for permission. She looked to one of her guards. "Show me." A small, hovering device floated forward from the guard's armor, projecting a blue hologram into the air. The footage was from the Academy's security systems, scenes of Ethan being shoved, tripped, mocked, and hit during training drills. There was no sound, but the images were clear enough. Students shifted uncomfortably. Some looked guilty. The bullies looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. The Empress's eyes narrowed, though her voice stayed calm. "You allowed my son to be treated this way?" The headmaster stammered. We were not aware of the extent." "Not aware?" The Empress's tone hardened, though she did not raise her voice. "In my empire, such failure would see you stripped of your title." The bullies' parents, who had been called in after the flagship's arrival, stood near the back of the hall. The Empress turned her gaze toward them. "Your children will be disciplined according to imperial law," she said. "You will answer for their actions as well. In my empire, a parent's duty is to teach honor. Clearly you have failed." One of the parents tried to speak, but the Empress raised a hand and the words died in their throat. She looked down at Ethan again. "Come. You will not remain here without protection." Ethan hesitated. This was the academy he had known for years, for better or worse. Leaving meant stepping into a world he didn't understand. But looking at her, at the way she stood unshaken in a room full of people who feared her, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. He nodded slowly. The Empress placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him toward the exit. The guards moved with them, forming a protective circle. As they walked past, the bullies avoided Ethan's eyes, their earlier arrogance gone completely. The great doors of the hall closed behind them, sealing away the stunned silence of the crowd. Outside, the Empress's flagship waited like a sleeping beast. Its hull shimmered under the station's lights, and the sight of it up close made Ethan realize just how massive it was. As they stepped inside the airlock, the Empress spoke quietly to him. "I should have come sooner. That is my mistake. But no one will harm you again." Ethan swallowed, unsure if he should ask the question burning in his mind. Why now? Why come back?" She looked at him, her eyes softening. "Because, my son, there are storms coming in the galaxy, and you are part of them, whether you want to be or not." The airlock doors closed behind them, and the hum of the flagship's engines began to rise. Ethan didn't know what she meant, but he had the feeling he was about to find out. The Valori flagship was like nothing Ethan had ever seen. Every hallway gleamed with polished metal, the walls decorated with flowing golden symbols that seemed to shift like liquid when he passed. Guards stood at every corner, their armor immaculate, their eyes sharp. But despite the grand beauty of the place, Ethan felt like he had stepped into a different universe, one where every move mattered and every mistake could be costly. His quarters were larger than his entire room back at the Academy. The bed was soft. The windows offered a view of the stars stretching forever, and a small console allowed him to contact anywhere within the ship. It was overwhelming, but strangely, it didn't feel like home. Not yet. The next morning, the Empress visited him in person. She entered without guards, wearing simpler robes, her long hair tied back. She sat across from him, her expression calm but serious. "You will remain at the Academy," she began, "but things will be different. I will assign Imperial instructors to train you. You will learn as a prince should, not just in books, but in skill." Ethan blinked. "Train me? In what?" "Combat, strategy, diplomacy, and more. Her voice softened slightly. "You have my blood, Ethan. It is time you learned what that means." That afternoon, he met his instructors. The first was Commander Thalrin, a tall, broad-shouldered Valori warrior with sharp silver eyes and a scar running down one cheek. He spoke little, but moved with the confidence of someone who had faced 100 battles and won. The second was Advisor Kalen, a slender alien with pale blue skin and long fingers, an expert in strategy and tactics. His mind seemed to work faster than the ship's computers, and he could predict an opponent's move before they made it. The third was Sarah, a young Valori woman skilled in diplomacy and languages. She greeted Ethan warmly, explaining that she would teach him the art of words, how to command a room without drawing a weapon. Training began immediately. In the combat hall, Thalrin handed Ethan a practice staff. "Show me how you fight," Ethan tried to remember the basic drills from the academy, swinging the staff in what he thought was the correct form. Thalrin blocked every strike with ease, barely moving his feet. "You are too predictable," Thalrin said. "You move as you were taught, and what you were taught was wrong." He corrected Ethan's stance, teaching him how to shift his weight, how to strike from unexpected angles, and how to keep moving so an opponent couldn't read his pattern. It was exhausting, but Ethan found himself learning quickly. In the strategy chamber, Kalen gave him simulated battle maps. Ethan was tasked with leading a small fleet against a stronger enemy force. His first attempt ended in defeat, his fleet crushed within minutes. "You rely too much on strength you do not have," Kalen said calmly. "Think like a human. Adapt." On his second attempt, Ethan used the terrain, asteroid fields and nebula clouds, to hide his ships, striking at weak points before retreating. Kalen smiled faintly when Ethan's fleet finally won. With Sarah, Ethan practiced speaking in front of holographic audiences. At first, his voice shook and his words stumbled, but she taught him how to keep eye contact, how to pause for impact, and how to turn questions to his advantage. Days passed. When Ethan returned to the academy under his new training schedule, everyone noticed the change. He walked straighter. He spoke more confidently. And during physical drills, his movements were faster, sharper. He didn't boast or challenge anyone, but his new skills were obvious. Most students began treating him with cautious respect. A few even tried to befriend him, though Ethan could tell it was more out of fear of the Empress than genuine kindness. But not everyone had changed. In the corner of the cafeteria, Jex and two of his old friends watched him with narrowed eyes. They had been publicly shamed, their parents forced to apologize to the Empress. Their status in the academy had dropped, and they blamed Ethan for it. "He thinks he's special now," one of them muttered. "He won't be smiling after the tournament," Jex replied. The Academy's annual interspecies tournament was only 2 weeks away, a series of physical, mental, and tactical challenges between the best students of each species. Jex had already signed up. And now, so had Ethan. The day of the tournament arrived. The Academy's central arena was filled with students, teachers, and visiting families. Even some guests from the station had come to watch. Ethan stood in the preparation room, wearing light combat gear provided by his instructors. Thalrin was beside him, adjusting the straps. "Remember," Thalrin said, "strength alone will not win this. Use your mind. Make them play your game." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. The first round was a speed and agility course through a shifting obstacle field. Competitors had to reach the beacon at the far end before the others. Ethan's smaller size, once a disadvantage, now worked for him. He darted through narrow gaps, climbed quickly, and used unexpected jumps to avoid being blocked. He crossed the finish line third, ahead of most of the field. The second round tested combat skills. Pairs faced off in the arena, armed with practice weapons. Ethan's first opponent was a tall, four-armed alien with reach and power. The crowd expected Ethan to be overpowered immediately, But instead of meeting force with force, Ethan dodged, struck at the alien's unguarded side, and used footwork to stay out of reach. He didn't win with raw power. He won by forcing his opponent to make mistakes. The crowd began to murmur. Some students exchanged glances, realizing the human boy they once mocked was becoming someone different. By the time Ethan reached the semifinals, the arena was buzzing with excitement. And then the pairing for the next match was announced. Ethan Valori versus Jex Rawl. Jex stepped forward, his crystal horns glinting under the lights. He smirked. Finally. Ethan stayed calm, gripping his staff. The match began, and Jex charged immediately, swinging with enough force to knock most opponents down in one hit. But Ethan sidestepped, letting the attack pass. The fight continued, Jex growing more frustrated as Ethan refused to be caught. Instead, Ethan struck at openings, a quick jab to the arm, a sweep at the legs, a strike to the side. Finally, with a quick twist, Ethan hooked his staff behind Jex's knee and swept him to the ground. The crowd roared. Jex lay there stunned. As the announcer called the match, Ethan offered his hand to help him up. For a moment, it seemed Jex might refuse. But then, with the eyes of the whole arena on him, he took it. Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. As he left the arena, Ethan spotted his mother in the stands. The Empress gave him the smallest nod, her eyes proud but unreadable. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere. Not because of his title, but because he had earned it. But he also knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was far bigger than the Academy, and his mother's words about storms coming still lingered in his mind. Visitors from the station and even a few from off-world. Banners of different species fluttered on the high walls, and the air shimmered slightly from the energy field that kept the audience safe from stray attacks. Ethan stood in the preparation area, gripping his training staff. The final round of the interspecies tournament was about to begin, and for the first time, he felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him. His opponent was a veteran of the tournament, a tall, armored warrior. From the Drakari species, known for their brute strength and nearly unbreakable scales. The Drakari champion, Vorak, had won the last 2 tournaments in a row. Commander Thalrin stood beside Ethan, adjusting the final straps on his armor. "Remember," Thalrin said, "he is stronger, faster, and has more reach than you. You will not win if you try to match him blow for blow. Make him think he's in control until he's not." Ethan nodded, trying to steady his breathing. The gates to the arena opened, and the announcer's voice boomed across the stadium. "Final round. Ethan Valori, human prince of the Valori Empire, versus Vorak of the Drakari clans." The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts. Ethan stepped into the sunlight of the arena floor, the sand crunching under his boots. Across from him, Vorak entered with heavy, deliberate steps, his dark green scales glinting under the light. He carried a massive 2-handed staff, heavier than most humans could even lift. Vorak grinned, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Small one," he rumbled, his deep voice carrying easily across the arena. "You have skill, but this is where it ends." Ethan didn't reply. He simply raised his staff and took his stance. The match began with a loud chime, and Vorak charged forward immediately. His first strike came down like a hammer, the force rattling through Ethan's arms as he blocked. The impact pushed him back several steps, his boots sliding in the sand. The crowd roared at the display of strength. Vorak kept pressing forward, swinging in wide arcs, each blow powerful enough to break bone if it landed cleanly. Ethan ducked, sidestepped, and deflected, never staying in one place long enough to be cornered. He remembered Kalen's words during strategy lessons. "Don't fight where your enemy is strongest. Fight where they are weakest." Ethan began to circle, forcing Vorak to turn constantly. Every time Vorak swung, Ethan stepped just out of reach and struck quickly at the joints between his armor plates. The blows didn't do much damage, but they forced Vorak to guard areas he normally ignored. The Drakari growled in frustration. "Stand and fight me properly!" But Ethan kept moving. Each time Vorik swung with full force, Ethan gave him nothing but empty air. And each time Vorik missed, he had to adjust his footing in the sand, slowing just a little more. Minutes passed, the match turning into a test of endurance. Sweat ran down Ethan's back, but he could see that Vorik's breathing was getting heavier. Then Ethan spotted his chance. Vorik stepped forward for another heavy strike, his foot landing on a patch of loose sand that shifted under his weight. His balance faltered for a split second, and Ethan moved. He darted inside Vorik's guard, striking low at the back of his knee with all his strength. The Drakari staggered, and before he could recover, Ethan spun and swept his legs from the other side. The giant warrior hit the sand hard, a cloud of dust rising around them. The crowd went wild. Vorik roared and swung from the ground. But Ethan had already moved, planting the tip of his staff just under the Drakari's chin. The signal lights above flashed. Match point. The announcer's voice rang out. "Winner, Ethan Valori." The noise from the stands was deafening. Students who had once mocked him were now cheering his name. Vorik lay there for a moment, then slowly pushed himself up. He looked at Ethan with a long, unreadable stare, and then extended his massive hand. "You fought well," he said simply. Ethan took the hand, shaking it firmly. "You too." After the match, as the arena cleared, Ethan saw his mother standing at the edge of the VIP balcony. She didn't smile, not fully, but the pride in her eyes was unmistakable. When he approached, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You fought with more than skill today," she said. "You fought with patience, with control, and with honor. Those are the marks of a leader." Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. "I just didn't want to lose." "You didn't win because you feared losing," Lariel said. "You won because you understood how to win." Back at the academy, the change was immediate. Students who once ignored him now greeted him with respect. Some even asked him for advice or tips on training. A few of his old bullies couldn't bring themselves to speak to him, but they no longer dared to mock him. In the cafeteria, Jex passed by and stopped for a moment. "You fought well," he muttered, almost grudgingly. Ethan looked at him, then nodded. "Thanks. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something closer to peace." That evening, Ethan stood by the academy's observation deck, looking out at the stars. His mother joined him quietly. "You could leave here now," she said. "Come to the palace. Live as a prince should." Ethan thought about it. Life on the flagship or in the palace would be safe, comfortable, but also distant. "I think I'll stay," he said finally. "There's still more for me to learn here." Lariel studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. But remember, you are not alone anymore. If you need me, I will come." As she left, Ethan looked back out into the endless darkness of space. Somewhere out there, dangers were waiting. Storms were coming, as she had said, but now, for the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't afraid, because he knew who he was, because he knew what he could do, and because he knew that when the time came, he would be ready.